What's up everyone, this is Dariusz Kalbarczyk, co-founder of MG Poland, JS Poland, AngularMaster.dev and WorkshopFest.dev. Welcome back to the Angular Master podcast. Today, together with Manfred Steyer, who is an excellent speaker, trainer, consultant, author, we will talk about modern Angular and MG Poland 2024 workshops. Hi Manfred, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, let's start with the simple question. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, that's really a simple question. I'm Manfred. I'm a trainer and consultant for Angular, and I'm focusing on Angular in the enterprise. I'm helping a lot of enterprises with Angular trainings and Angular consulting, and I have quite a few nice colleagues that do the same. Our company is called Angular Architects, and like the name is already telling it, it's about architecture in the space of Angular, making sure your software is maintainable in the long run and making sure you are meeting all your architectural goals.
Your company, Angular Architects, is now offering a modern Angular workshop. By the way, we will have this workshop at MG Poland 2024. What's modern Angular about?
Yeah, I would say at the end of the day, modern Angular is just an umbrella term for all those new features we got since Angular 14. All those features that make Angular a bit more lightweight, makes using it a bit easier, streamlines the whole experience. It's about standalone components. A lot of people have this on their minds. But it's also about standalone APIs. APIs that allow you to set up a reusable piece of software. We don't have ng modules anymore, or at least they are optional. And so we need those standalone APIs to set up our reusable packages. It's also about updated APIs. Perhaps, for instance, we have updated APIs for the router. There is now the possibility to bind inputs to routing parameters, but now we can also express guards and resolvers in terms of functions. And it's also about updated APIs for the HTTP client. We've got this new built-in control flow, add for, add if, and so on. We have signals and an improved change detection that paves the way to zoneless Angular, which is something we will get quite soonish. Now with Angular 18, there will be an experimental version of it. But it's also about SSR, server-side rendering, deferred loading, and hydration. It's about ES build that is really speeding up your build process. And there are several ways for an automatic migration. Because quite often migrating to new Angular or to modern Angular is quite a mechanical task. And so it can be automated with schematics. And at the end of the day, it's also about interoperability between existing application code and libraries and the new modern Angular world. Because we cannot expect that everything is updated immediately. And so the Angular team gives us a really nice interop story. Everything works seamlessly together, the modern stuff with the traditional stuff and vice versa.
A new, also but controversial topic is signals. Why do we need them?
Yeah, why do we need signals? What is the vision here? Well, at the end of the day, it's all about bringing some change data from your application into your view. Somehow, Angular needs to know that something was updated, and signals allow us to inform Angular and also other consumers that something was updated. And so Angular, the change detection can work accordingly. So it's all about the change detection. It's all about notifying Angular that there is a change. So far, we used Zone.js for this. So Zone.js just told Angular, well, there was an event handler, and then Angular needed to guess where the change was. For this, Angular needed to search down the whole component tree. If we went with on push, then it was a bit more performant, because in this case, Angular could have excluded several parts of your component tree, and without on push, Angular had to search the whole tree. But nevertheless, Angular did not know upfront where the change was. Angular had to search the tree somehow. And with signals, now Angular will exactly know where a change was, because the signal, the affected signal, will tell Angular, well, here you have a new value.
Why don't we just use observables?
The thing is, you can totally use observables for the same task. Also, this fine-grained change detection will work with observables. We can even go zoneless with observables, starting with Angular 18. It's experimental, first of all, but sooner or later it will be a stable feature. So in theory, we could totally go with observables. Also, they tell us, hey, you have a change here, and please act accordingly. But the Angular team said they want to provide a simple way of doing this. Observables can be quite complex. They are powerful, yes, and they are also sometimes complex, especially if you start using Angular. Then you might feel overwhelmed with RxJS. And to make it easy to use this approach, they gave us signals. Signals just tell us that here or there was a change, and they don't provide all this power of RxJS operators. And so you can get started with signals, and in most cases, perhaps signals are good enough, but if you need the power of observables, you can switch over to them.
Do we still need observables?
Yeah, we still need them, or at least we need something like observables. And when I say we need something like observables, I also say currently they are without competition. So chances are high that people will install RxJS, even though it will become optional in the future. We need observables because they are really good with async stuff, with asynchronous tasks. Something currently signals are not capable of. They are not good at dealing with it, but observables are. And that also means they can trigger async stuff, but also control overlapping asynchronous requests. For instance, there are flattening operators like switchmap that give you guarantees what happens if several requests are overlapping. In the case of switchmap, only the last request is used and all the other requests are cancelled, which is very likely the behavior you would expect if you are searching with a parameter and if you are changing this parameter. And besides this, the other flattening operators like concat-map or exhaust-map or flat-map give you different guarantees for overlapping requests. So in this regards, observables are currently really without competition. Besides this, they're also good with other stuff like the bouncing actions or other operators beyond the bounce time that are baked into RxJS. You can just use them without thinking about how to implement something like this. And last but not least, observables are really good when it comes to representing events. Something like something happened here, something happened there. Signals themselves are not suitable for expressing events. They are just expressing data that can be changed, but they cannot that nicely express events. And the reason for this is a design decision. Signals are glitch-free, which basically means if you are changing a signal several times in a row, only the last change is propagated to the consumer. So let's say you are changing a signal from A to B to C to D to E, then only the consumer will know that something has been changed to E. But all the intermediate values are not propagated to the consumer. And in the case of data that needs to be updated in a view, this is totally what you want to have. You just want to know that you need to update this value to E. And you don't want to know about all the intermediate values. Dealing with them would cause unnecessary work. However, this also means that if you see a signal as a source of an event, then several intermediate events might be swallowed. And that's why you should not use signals for events. Go with observables if you need to represent something like this.
You are now listening to the Angular Master podcast by ANG Poland. Listen, code, repeat, all you need to know to become a super Angular developer. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and drop us a cool comment. And don't miss out our second show, the JavaScript Master Podcast, where you find tons of fantastic JavaScript topics. You often say that the stores, like the new AngularX Signal Store, are the missing link in the Signal story. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a good point. So in my opinion, with signals, stores are becoming more important. Not less important, as some people might think. They are becoming more important. And the reason is that signals are primarily for transporting data, change data from your application into your view. And this always happens, at least currently and in the foreseeable future, in a synchronous way. And for everything else, we need other building blocks. For executing asynchronous stuff, we need other building blocks. For representing events, we need other building blocks. But also for, what was the third thing? I think I forgot it. But in general, we need other stuff, other building blocks for async stuff and for events. And this is where stores really shine. Stores can trigger async tasks, and after we have the result of an async task, a store can put the new data, the result, into a signal. And then we can use signals for what they are suitable of. We can use them to propagate this new value in a synchronous way down from your store to your view. And on the way from the store to the view, we can project this data. We can calculate, let's say, view models. We can join different data chunks together. We can create the form of the data we need in this very view. Sometimes we might need, let's say, flights with passengers. Sometimes we might need passengers with flights. Sometimes we might need all the passengers that are not boarded. And out of our signals the store is propagating, we can calculate those data structures we need in this or that view. But for everything else, for executing async stuff, we can leverage the store. And the store might also delegate to RxJS because, as mentioned before, it's really good when it comes to overlapping async requests. Also for triggering the store, for sending over an action in terms of Redux, or for calling a method in terms of the lightweight signal store, we need to use other mechanisms. Also here, signals are not that well suited because they are not suited for events. And so for this, we can go with browser events or we can go with RxJS. That means in the middle, in the center, we have the store. It gets a notification. It is doing something. It is fetching some new data in an async way. And then this data is flowing down in a synchronous way via signals to our templates, to our view.
With Angular 18, we will get experimental support for zoneless change detection. How does this work?
Currently, Zone.js is triggering the change detection. It is informing Angular, hey, there was an event handler. Please check your bounds data. Perhaps it was changed. And then Angular is doing what it needs to be done to find out about changes. With the on-push mode, it's a bit more performance. Without on bush, everything needs to be checked. And now, instead of triggering or instead of making zone to trigger the change detection, we can, starting with Angular 18, use bound signals or even the async pipe to trigger the change detection. That means whenever a data-bound signal receives a new value, a new task is scheduled. And so Angular knows, well, I need to check this very component here for a change. And we will be capable of doing the same just with the async pipe. Also here, when the async pipe receives a new value from an observable, also then the async pipe can schedule a new task that will make Angular to check this or that component.
Does that mean that I don't need signals for zoneless change detection?
Yeah, totally. This was also a surprise for us because originally we thought that we need signals for this, but then we got a nice Christmas present from Alex Riccabo from the Angular team. He tweeted about it last December. He tweeted about the fact that they plan to have this intermediate step that allows us to also use the async pipe and observables to trigger change detection without Zone.js in the future. And this is quite nice, and that shows that everything is backwards compatible and that you can use your existing code. No one needs you to immediately update your code. Just stick with the async pipe, just stick with best practices like on bush and observables, and you will get the same behavior. But saying this, signals will streamline this. And once we have the so-called signal components, then having all those performance improvements is far easier, because then it's baked in. Then it's the way of doing things, and then you don't need to concentrate on observables. But if you love them, or if they are in handy for what you are doing, you can have the same effect with them. Perhaps there will be some performance improvements for signal components in the future. The Angular team is thinking about just partially updating components. If we have a larger component and only one part of it was affected by a change, then perhaps we only need to update this. And future will tell us if this will just work with signals in the future, or if the Angular team also supports observables for this partial updates.
Do I have any benefits of using signals over observables in this case?
Well, it's the streamlined experience. So it's easier for you to get started. It's lowering the entry barrier. And with signal components, this new component type the Angular team is thinking about, everything will be even more streamlined. Then you will get a good performance by default, because then using signals in this or that way is the way to go. There won't be another way for data binding in those components. So it's about streamlining things and perhaps about some performance improvements in the future.
So why did we get a new control flow syntax?
Because of signals, the Angular team needed to rework the control flow anyway. Because the vision is that sooner or later, when iterating, for instance, an array, we don't just get out elements, but signals with elements. Everything shall be signal-based so that we can propagate signals and changes down to our child components. And because of this, as mentioned, a larger rework needs to be done. And the Angular team said, well, if we need to rework it, then perhaps we can also improve it. And then, because of this, they came up with this new control flow syntax that is now baked into Angular. You don't need any common module for it anymore. And it is clearly distinguishable from the remaining parts of the markup. You see at first glance, hey, this is a control flow statement, a for or an if, This is here markup that is used within the control flow syntax.
It looks like modern Angular is moving away from field decorators. Instead of an input decorator, we have an input function now. Same for output and content children. Why is that?
Yeah, so we are indeed moving away from field decorators, not from class decorators like add injectable or add component or add pipe. This is not the plan, but we are indeed with modern Angular moving away from decorators on the field level. And the main reason is field decorators don't work well together with the type system. So, for instance, think about an input decorator, add input with required true. In this case, Angular knows that this input is required, but TypeScript and the TypeScript type system does not know. And so TypeScript will still enforce that you check for null and undefined values, even though it's required in the Angular world, even though it will never ever become null or undefined. And by switching out those decorators by functions, we can also tell the TypeScript type system about its return value. We can tell it that if required is true, we just will get an input of t. And if required is not true, we will get an input of t or undefined. So yeah, it's a convenient way to streamline things and to tell the TypeScript type system about what's going on here. Less misunderstandings and less typing.
What's with deferred loading and SSR? Do we really need that?
Yeah, do we really need that? Deferred loading and SSR? And my answer is it depends. I am mainly doing in-house software that is used by people within a company, and their performance, at least initial page load, is not a huge topic. As long as it is fast after starting it, it does not matter if starting the application takes 3 additional seconds or not. So for most of my customers, it's not a big game changer. However, there are other environments. If you build a shopping system, if you build a public portal, then initial page load is really king. Then you fight about each and every millisecond, because each and every millisecond makes some people to leave your page. If it takes too long, they are leaving your page. They are switching over to Facebook, watching some cat videos or something like this. And they don't do what you want them to do. They don't buy something at your shop, or they don't do other stuff like consuming your services. And so for public portals, this is really vital. And that's why I'm really happy that Angular gives us now deferred loading, where some parts of your page are not loaded immediately, but only later, or if you need them. That means the remaining parts are really fast. Or SSR, where you pre-render something on the server side. Or partial hydration, where the combination of signals, deferred loading, and SSR leads to downloading stuff as late as possible, postponing it as long as possible to a point where you really need it. And because of this, I was really happy that we got this feature, because it would not be nice if the Angular community would be behind. It would not be nice if there would be bad benchmarks about Angular. It does not matter if those benchmarks affect you or not, but they might shy potential users away. And so I'm really happy that now Angular gets all those features.
You and your colleagues do a lot with architectures. How does modern Angular affect the architecture of large-scale Angular apps?
I would say, first of all, the principles of architecture are the same. Our overall story is not affected by this. It's still about verticalization, where we subdivide our applications into vertical parts that can be implemented by different teams and that don't affect each other that much. Strategic design from the domain-driven design still gives us a lot of nice concepts and ideas for this verticalization, for identifying those parts, and also for making sure those parts are not intermingled too much, because you want to change something here without breaking something there. So this is not affected by modern Angular. I think this is a general rule of software architecture. Also, layering, subdividing a vertical into several technical layers is not affected by modern Angular. It's still a good thing. Saying this verticalization is more important than layering, because it allows us to have chunks that can be implemented by different teams. Also, a categorization of different parts of your Angular application is still important. Deciding between parts implementing features, deciding between parts implementing reusable widgets, data access and utility functions. Deciding between those categories is also quite important, because it allows you to reuse certain things, and it also makes sure that not everything is intermingled with each other. For instance, while a feature might need to access a reusable widget, the reusable widget should not access the concrete feature, because if a reusable widget is accessing a reusable feature, a concrete feature, it's not reusable anymore. And we have the same with utility functions. A feature can use a utility function, but not vice versa. This gives us some rules we should enforce with linting in our application, and those rules assure that not everything is coupled together, and that not everything needs to know all the other parts. Parts can be changed separately without respecting each other all the times. Another thing that is not affected by modern Angular is thinking about a nice folder structure, mirroring your verticals, your business domains, mirroring your layers, mirroring the categorization like features, widgets, and so on. And you can even do this with folders or libraries if you go with NX, for instance, or micro frontends. So all of this is not affected. And that's why I said before, our overall story, our overarching story is not changed by this. However, the way we are implementing all those ideas is for sure affected by modern Angular. For instance, now we don't use ng modules anymore because we have standalone components and standalone APIs. We use them instead. And also now we go with ES-Build, which is a faster bundler. And when it comes to ES-Build, there are some changes for federation, which is the foundation for quite a lot micro frontend implementations. Also, using signals for local and global state management is affecting how we implement our architecture. And we have the same when we talk about signals and the improved change detection. For instance, now we need to know when to use signals, when to not use them, when to delegate to a store, and how the store fits into this overarching signal story. So at the end of the day, the concepts are still the same, but how we implement them is affected.
You currently offer a modern Angular workshop with all these topics, but rumor says you already had such a workshop about 10 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, we indeed had a modern Angular workshop 10 years ago. It was one of our first workshops when we started to do workshops in this space. Of course, we had an introduction workshop and an advanced workshop, but we also back then had a modern Angular workshop. However, it was modern Angular JS, of course. That time, Angular, the new Angular, was already announced. And some people were thinking about how to get some of the goodness of this new upcoming Angular in our existing AngularJS application. And so we told people how to use AngularJS with TypeScript, which was quite a new thing back then. It was not a situation where everyone believed into TypeScript. So we really needed to convince people that TypeScript is a good thing. Nowadays, we don't need this discussion anymore. Nowadays, it's clear that we are going with TypeScript. And for people that did not like TypeScript, we also told people how to use ECMAScript 2015 with AngularJS. There were several transpilers for this, like Barber. We also told people how to use classes, how to use decorators, and how to prepare AngularJS for a migration to Angular. For instance, back then, with one of the last versions of AngularJS, AngularJS got an component concept. Before they had just directives, and then they got components, which was just a bit of sugar, syntactic sugar around directives, but it allowed us to think in a component-oriented way. And it also allowed us to prepare for a migration to Angular, to make it more similar to Angular. And so, back then, 10 years ago, we told people how to use AngularJS in a type-safe, modern, and class-based way. Let's call it class-based or component-oriented. And already back then, I told people, well, it looks like Angular, the new Angular, is really built for the long term. The Angular team really did a great job for building a sound foundation for a framework that can reinvent itself on the go. If you think about Ivy, this was the first reinvention of Angular. And this really proved that this architecture of Angular meets its goals, making sure it is flexible enough to be maintainable and usable for the long run, for 10, 20, or even more years. And now with this new Angular wave, we have the same. Everything is backwards compatible, and the parts are renewed, and so we can use it in a new, fresh way. That means Angular will stay relevant. I think without modern Angular, without this movement, Angular would lose some relevance. But besides this, all the existing code still works. So this is really a huge achievement.
So what do you do with existing code?
So one thing is we have a sound interop story. Standalone stuff really naturally, by design, works together with ng modules, but also vice versa. ng modules work together with standalone stuff. You can import standalone stuff into ng modules. This was really a smart design there. Also, when it comes to the new zoneless change detection, we can stick with the Angular pipe. If we used the async pipe and observables in a proper way, we don't need to change a lot. And besides this, we can use signals for new stuff to streamline this task a bit, if we want. Also, there are several automatic migrations. For instance, the control flow story can be migrated in an automatic way. And also, the road to standalone can be automated. Angular itself comes with schematics for a migration to standalone and to the new control flow. When it comes to the standalone migration, sometimes you need to check the source code after running a migration, because not everything can be done automatically, but most of the steps can be done. Something that cannot be done automatically is converting your module .for root, because the converter does not know what's the counterpart for your for root method in the standalone world. This needs to be done by hand. But besides of this, it's really great when it comes to an automatic migration. And also the community is great. There are really some smart people working on ng extension, which is an open source package that gives you a migration to signal inputs and signal outputs, and the new inject function that is a bit more lightweight than just going with constructor-based injection. Plus, it also works nicely together with the TypeScript type system, something we've discussed before. And besides this, you don't need to worry or hurry, because also the existing code remains working. So you don't need to panic. Everything is safe. Your investments are safe, and Angular is becoming better, which assures that Angular is relevant in the long run.
Manfred, can you share a recent personal achievement that you are particularly proud of?
I'm really happy that our team works that nicely together. Meanwhile, we are 15 people at Angular Architects, and it's really a pleasure to work together with all of them, because it's always at eyes high, and it's also about bringing together different knowledge and different opinions. So this is really, really a huge win, and I'm really happy that all of this works that nicely. We are really a cool group, if I am allowed to say that. Another thing I'm proud about is a little tiny side project. I never dealt a lot with compiler construction and 3D. I somehow always prevented this when I started informatics. But during the last months, I played around with it. I implemented a little tiny C compiler just for fun, and a little tiny 3D engine, and also a little tiny 3D game. And this is nothing I need for my job, no, but it's also a nice achievement. And it was a lot of fun doing this without any pressure from a university or something like this, because I was not rated. And so, yeah, it was like a little boy who is playing with bricks and Lego.
Who has been the most influential person in your personal or professional life?
I think there were some of them, but all of them have something in common. They were positive people who also helped me to focus on positive aspect and to don't worry that much about negative aspect. People that sometimes gave me a very tiny push into the right direction, but not in a violent way, in a way that really helped me, in a way that did not make me feel the push at all. One of those people was a teacher in high school who really helped me with a lot of things, also in terms of adjusting my thinking, about looking at the positive aspects, also about focusing on working with people, not only technology. He was doing computer science, but he told me, don't focus only on technology, also focus on people, because at the end of the day, it's always about people that need to work together. And a second person that had a similar approach was a former boss of mine. He was really a great leader. I had the pleasure of working together with him between 2008 and I think 2014. And I learned a lot from him just by watching him practicing leadership, how he is also pushing people in a very soft way into the right direction, how he was looking at the things people were good at, and how he was not always complaining about the drawbacks of people, areas where people were not that good at. And yeah, I think this really influenced my life in a positive way.
What are some of the lesser known but valuable skills that you think are crucial for success in tech?
Beyond technology, I think it's really about working together with people, also accepting different opinions. It's quite funny. Sometimes we have flame wars over this versus that opinion. I always compare this to our discussions in high school when we discussed about what's better, a moped or a scooter like a Vespa. And in retrospect, this discussion was ridiculous. And also out there in the real world, there are always several opinions, several approaches, and quite often all those approaches work. But you just need to decide for one of those approaches. And I think this is really something you need to learn, especially if you are a consultant. Seeing that there are several approaches that might lead to your results, but also making sure those approaches work, making sure the approach something chose for is used in a safe way. And it's also about not reducing complexity to one dimension, like good or bad. Quite often it's a multi-dimensional issues, and each and every dimension has a lot of possible values. And once you have seen that, once you have accepted that, finding a good working solution is a bit easier for you. Once you have seen, well, there is not the perfect solution because there are that many dimensions and possibilities, finding a good working solution is really easier.
How do you approach learning new technologies or frameworks in the ever-evolving field of software development?
Yeah, so when it comes to technical stuff, I learn best by reading about it and by trying it out. When it comes to new stuff I'm not that attached to, then perhaps talking with someone about it or watching a recording or attending a course is better. But when it's about programming, it's mainly about reading and trying out stuff. And the good thing is, as we are consulting a lot of companies, we know about a lot of pitfalls. And so I'm always eager to test run new approaches, new technologies about those pitfalls I know my customers would run into when they use this or that. And this also allows me to develop tactics for avoiding those pitfalls with this or that technology.
How do you stay motivated during challenging projects?
Well, I really have the pleasure that I really love my job. And that's why staying motivated is not that difficult. Sometimes I also found out I need to reinvent myself to stay motivated. That means I need to get rid of existing tasks where I might be good at, but tasks that are not that fun for me anymore. For instance, several years ago, I did a lot of lessons at the University of Applied Sciences. And I loved it. I really loved to work together with students. I loved to think everything through, to wrap my brain around how to explain, let's say, Java development or web development to someone who is new to this field. And it really was also good for me because it really forced me into learning how to explain stuff. But then I realized after 8 years, after 10 years, that this is a job I was not that bad at. So it was really always nice to work together with students, and I always got nice ratings from them. But I realized now it's too much. Now I need to reinvent myself because I've done this for quite a long time. Now I know how to explain how Java works and how web development works. Now I want to do something else. And this was when I started to focus on Angular and other stuff. I already did it before because I'm doing consulting for ages, but this was a difficult decision because this was about not doing one thing anymore, and instead of this, doing more of something else that was more fun back then, like talking about Angular and teaching Angular, that is also reinventing itself on a regular basis. And so this also helps me to stay motivated.
So if you weren't working in tech, what other profession would you like to try?
Funnily, my grandparents thought I might become a priest, but this was never my career path. The thing was, I was one of those boys helping the priests in church. I don't know the English term for this. And I did it for quite a time. And so my grandparents thought I might become a priest, but it's really none of my focus topics. Nevertheless, ethics is something that is important for me. And if you leave a lot of stuff from religion away, something that is staying is ethics. All the religions are dealing in some way with ethics and how to deal with other people. So perhaps it also fits a bit to what I'm doing today. But beside this, in school, I was always quite keen into biology and also into history. I really loved history. And I think now, where I work a lot together with people, I'm also interested into psychology, using psychology in a good way. You know, there are a lot of bad patterns people use to control people and to influence people in a bad way. I'm not speaking about this. I'm speaking about helping people with something psychologists found out during the ages.
What's your favorite way to unwind after a busy day of coding?
Currently, I'm doing some gaming with my son. He is now about 8 years old, and we are playing on the Nintendo Switch a lot. So this is something I'm really enjoying. It also gives me back some parts of my own childhood where I did this. I like to go to the cinema to watch good series on Netflix and so on. I'm also watching a lot of Marvel movies with my boy. He's really into Spider-Man and X-Men. He really loves Wolverine and so on. And he's always asking me how this is even possible. And then I have to explain him, well, it's just a movie, but within the movie, it's explained this or that way. And I also like to sit down with people and to have a good conversation. Sit down with them during dinner or with a nice coffee, with a nice cappuccino, and have a good conversation.
Manfred, thank you. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. It is always a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
I thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.